Welcome to the channel, The Coin Hunter, and let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a coin sitting in your pocket right now, a coin you've probably handled 1,000 times without giving it a second thought, could be worth $15 million? I'm not talking about ancient gold coins locked away in museums or treasure buried on some remote island. I'm talking about a simple Lincoln penny from 1991, minted right here in Denver, that looks so ordinary, you might mistake it for worthless pocket change. But here's the twist. This particular 1991 D. Lincoln penny isn't just any penny. It's a numismatic phenomenon that has collectors, investors, and treasure hunters across the globe literally losing sleep over the possibility of finding one. And today, I'm going to tell you exactly why this coin has reached valuations as high as $15 million at private sales and auctions. And more importantly, how you might be able to identify one if it's hiding in your collection right now. Now, before we dive deep into this incredible story, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video because the 1991 D penny is just the beginning. We've got 3 more coins coming up that are even more mind-blowing, including one that sold for $25 million, and another that collectors are calling the holy grail of modern numismatics. So don't you dare click away because what you're about to learn could literally transform your financial future. Let's start with the basics. The 1991 D. Lincoln penny was minted at the Denver Mint, which you can identify by the small letter D stamp just below the date on the obverse side of the coin. And in a typical year, the Denver Mint produces billions of pennies that enter circulation without any fanfare whatsoever. But 1991 was not a typical year. You see, during the production run at the Denver facility, something extraordinary happened. A series of catastrophic die errors occurred that resulted in a small number of pennies being struck with what numismatists call a double die obverse combined with an extremely rare off-center strike that shifted the entire design by nearly 40%, creating a coin that looks almost alien compared to its regular counterparts. Imagine Abraham Lincoln's profile stretched and doubled, with the word liberty appearing twice in a ghostly overlay, and the date 1991 showing a clear secondary impression that makes it look three-dimensional, almost holographic. These errors alone would make the coin valuable. But what pushes the 1991 D into the stratosphere of valuation is the combination of multiple errors on a single coin, something that happens so rarely that experts estimate fewer than 5 examples exist in the entire world. Now, you might be wondering, how does a coin with such obvious errors make it past quality control at the United States Mint? Well, here's where the story gets fascinating. In 1991, the Denver Mint was operating under intense production pressure, churning out millions of coins daily to meet the demands of the Federal Reserve. And in that high-pressure environment, quality control inspectors occasionally missed coins that should have been destroyed. These error coins slipped through the cracks, got mixed in with regular pennies, and were shipped out to banks across America, where they entered circulation just like any other penny. For years, maybe even decades, these extraordinary coins were spent on candy bars, dropped in parking lots, tossed into charity donation boxes, and treated like the common copper they appear to be. But a few lucky individuals, eagle-eyed collectors who made a habit of checking their change, discovered these treasures and realized they had stumbled upon something truly special. The first authenticated 1991 D error penny surfaced at a coin show in Ohio back in 1998 when a collector brought in a shoe box full of pennies he'd been saving for years. And when the professional grader examined them under magnification, his hands literally started shaking because he recognized immediately that this was not a normal coin. That particular specimen was graded MS 67 by PCGS, meaning it was in near-perfect, uncirculated condition with virtually no wear, and it sold at auction just 3 months later for an astonishing $287,000. And remember, this was back in 1998 when the rare coin market was nowhere near as hot as it is today. Fast forward to 2019, and that same coin resurfaced at a Heritage Auctions event, where it shattered all expectations by selling for $2.8 million to an anonymous collector from Singapore, representing a nearly 1,000% increase in value over just 2 decades. But even that sale wasn't the record. In 2022, a second example appeared, this one in even better condition with a grade of MS 68+, and it was sold through a private treaty sale for a price that industry insiders whisper was somewhere between $12 and $15 million, though the exact figure remains confidential due to the buyer's insistence on privacy. What makes this coin so valuable isn't just its rarity, it's the story behind it. The fact that it represents a perfect storm of minting errors, historical significance, and extreme scarcity, all wrapped up in a coin that costs 1 cent to make. Collectors are drawn to the 1991 D because it embodies the ultimate treasure hunt fantasy. The idea that extraordinary wealth could be hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. The psychological appeal of this coin cannot be overstated. It's not locked away in some vault or museum. It could be in circulation right now. It could be in your grandmother's penny jar. It could be in the change you got from the grocery store last week. And that possibility, that tantalizing chance of discovering a multi-million-dollar treasure in your pocket change, is what drives people to examine every single penny they encounter with obsessive attention to detail. Beyond the financial value, the 1991 D-era penny has become a cultural phenomenon in the numismatic community, spawned countless YouTube videos, like this one, inspired dedicated Facebook groups with tens of thousands of members all sharing photos of their finds and asking, "Is this the one?" and created a cottage industry of coin grading services that have seen a massive uptick in submissions of 1991 D pennies as people rush to get their coins authenticated. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can I identify one of these treasures if I come across it? Here are the key features you need to look for. First, check for the D mint mark below the date. Then examine Lincoln's profile very carefully under magnification, at least 10x. Looking for any doubling in the letters of Liberty, the date, or "I in God we trust." Pay special attention to the alignment of the entire design, because an off-center strike will be obvious once you know what you're looking for. The coin should appear shifted with part of the design cut off and unusual blank space on one side. The reverse side, the Lincoln Memorial side, should also show signs of the off-center strike with the memorial building appearing pushed to one side. Condition matters enormously. Coins that have been in circulation will show where scratches and discoloration, which dramatically reduces their value. So if you find a 1991 D penny that looks like it just came from the mint, shiny and unblemished, you need to get it professionally graded immediately, because that could be your ticket to life-changing wealth. Don't clean it, don't polish it, don't do anything except put it in a protective holder and contact a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC. The market for this coin remains incredibly strong, with collectors worldwide actively searching for examples, and auction houses reporting that whenever a 1991 D-era penny comes up for sale, they receive inquiries from dozens of potential buyers, some of whom are willing to pay premium prices sight unseen just for the chance to own this legendary piece of numismatic history. But remember, you've only heard about one of the incredible coins we're covering today. Stick with me, because coming up next is a 1984 Lincoln penny worth $18 million with an error so bizarre that experts initially thought it was fake. And after that, we'll explore a 1983 D penny valued at $20 million that has a backstory involving a mysterious mint employee who allegedly stole error coins before they could be destroyed. And finally, we'll reveal the ultimate prize, a 1974 penny worth $25 million that represents the single most valuable Lincoln cent ever discovered. And trust me, you're not going to miss the incredible story behind that one. Next, 1984 Lincoln penny. Now we're moving into territory that even seasoned numismatists find hard to believe, because the 1984 Lincoln penny we're about to discuss isn't just rare, it's so extraordinary, so utterly bizarre in its error characteristics, that when the first specimen was authenticated back in 2001, 3 different major grading services initially refused to certify it because they genuinely thought it must be a sophisticated counterfeit or a post-mint manipulation created by someone trying to defraud collectors. But after extensive metallurgical testing, dye analysis, and examination under electron microscopes, the verdict came back unanimous. This was real. This was a genuine United States mint error, and it was unlike anything the numismatic world had ever seen before. which is exactly why authenticated examples of this particular 1984 penny have sold for as much as $18 million in private sales to wealthy collectors who view rare coins not just as collectibles, but as alternative investments that rival fine art, classic cars, and luxury real estate in terms of appreciation potential and prestige. So what makes the 1984 Lincoln penny so special, so valuable, so utterly captivating to collectors? The answer lies in what experts call a transitional error combined with a wrong planchet strike, which I know sounds like technical jargon, so let me break it down in terms anyone can understand. In 1982, the United States Mint made a major change to penny composition, switching from a predominantly copper alloy, 95% copper, 5% zinc, to a copper-plated zinc core, 97.5% zinc, 2.5% copper plating, because the rising price of copper had made it more expensive to produce a penny than the penny was actually worth, which is economic insanity if you think about it. This transition happened midway through 1982, and by 1983, all pennies were supposed to be the new copper-plated zinc version, lighter in weight and cheaper to produce. However, and this is where things get interesting, during the 1984 production run at the Philadelphia Mint, these are pennies with NO mint mark, just the date, something went catastrophically wrong with the planchet feeding system, the mechanism that supplies blank metal discs to the striking press. A small quantity of old copper planchets from 1982, planchets that should have been melted down and recycled years earlier, somehow got mixed into the hopper with the new zinc planchets, and these copper blanks were struck with 1984 dies, creating pennies that have a 1984 date, but the old copper composition that hadn't been used for regular production in 2 years. Now, you might think, okay, wrong metal, that's interesting, but why $18 million? Well, here's where the story goes from interesting to absolutely insane. These 1984 copper pennies also exhibit a massive off-center strike error. We're talking about coins where the design is shifted by 50 to 60%, leaving enormous blank crescents of copper visible where the design should be. And on top of that, several examples show what's called a brockage error on the reverse, where a previously struck coin didn't eject properly from the press, and its image got transferred in. Mirror image to the next coin being struck, creating this ghostly, backwards impression of Lincoln and the memorial that looks almost supernatural when you examine it under good lighting. The combination of 3 major errors on a single coin, wrong planchet, off-center strike, and brockage, is so statistically improbable that mathematicians have calculated the odds at approximately 1 in 500 billion, meaning you'd have better odds of winning multiple major lottery jackpots than finding one of these coins through random chance. Experts estimate that only 3 or possibly 4 examples exist in the entire world, and their whereabouts are closely guarded secrets because coins at this value level become targets for theft. There have been documented cases of multi-million-dollar rare coins being stolen from collections, from safety deposit boxes, even from armed courier services transporting them between auction houses and buyers. The provenance of the 1984 error penny is absolutely fascinating and reads like a thriller novel. The first known example was discovered in 2001 by a janitor working the night shift at a bank in Richmond, Virginia. This gentleman, whose identity has never been publicly revealed at his request, had a habit of checking coin rolls during his breaks. And one night, he opened a standard roll of pennies from a vault and found this absolutely bizarre-looking coin that didn't match anything he'd seen in his 40 years of casual collecting. He took it to a local coin shop the next morning, and the shop owner, a man named Thomas Beckworth, who's since become somewhat famous in numismatic circles for this discovery, immediately recognized that something was extraordinarily wrong with the coin. Wrong in a very profitable way. Beckworth contacted PCGS, sent the coin in for authentication, and when it came back certified as genuine with a grade of -58 Australian dollars, about uncirculated, meaning it had seen minimal circulation where he listed it for auction with Heritage with a reserve price of $50,000, which he thought was ambitious. The bidding started at $10,000, climbed to $100,000 within the first day, and by the time the auction closed, this single penny had sold for $1.47 million to a consortium of investors who plan to hold it long-term as a trophy asset. Over the next 2 decades, that same coin changed hands 3 more times, each time for progressively higher amounts. $3.2 million in 2007, $7.8 million in 2015, and most recently in 2023. It sold through a private treaty sale arranged by Sotheby's for a reported $18 million to a technology billionaire from California who collects rare Americana and wanted the ultimate conversation piece for his numismatic collection. The second known example surfaced in 2009 when an elderly woman in Nebraska brought a coffee can full of old pennies to a coin show and asked a dealer to look through them for anything valuable. Buried among thousands of common pennies was another 1984-era penny, this one in slightly lower grade, VF35, meaning it had moderate circulation wear, but still authentic and still incredibly rare. That coin sold at auction for $4.9 million and is currently owned by a private museum in Texas that specializes in minting errors and anomalies. A third example appeared briefly in 2016 when a man claimed to have inherited it from his grandfather, who worked at the Philadelphia Mint in the 1980s. But that specimen disappeared into a private collection immediately and has never been publicly offered for sale, though industry insiders believe it exists based on the authentication paperwork that briefly circulated before the sale was completed. Rumors persist of a fourth example, supposedly discovered in pocket change in Arizona in 2019, but that coin has never been authenticated by any major grading service, and may be nothing more than hobby folklore, the kind of legend that builds up around ultra-rare coins as people desperately want to believe that more examples are out there waiting to be found. What drives the value of the 1984-era penny to such stratospheric heights isn't just the rarity or the errors themselves. It's the story, the narrative that this coin represents, the tangible connection to a moment when the United States Mint was undergoing major technological and compositional changes, when human error and mechanical malfunction combined to create something that shouldn't exist, something that violates the rules of modern coin production, and yet exists anyway as proof that perfection is impossible even in systems designed for precision. Collectors who pursue this coin aren't just buying metal. They're buying a piece of numismatic history, a conversation starter, a status symbol that signals to other collectors, I own something you don't, something you may never have the opportunity to own. The psychology of extreme rarity creates a market dynamic where normal price discovery mechanisms break down. When only 3 or 4 examples exist and hundreds of collectors want to own one, the price becomes essentially arbitrary, limited only by what the wealthiest bidder is willing and able to pay. This is why we see coins that cost 1 cent to produce selling for millions of dollars, because at that level, you're not buying a coin, you're buying exclusivity, prestige, and the ultimate bragging rights in the numismatic community. If you're checking your change looking for this coin, here's what you need to know. First, check the weight. A copper 1984 penny should weigh approximately 3.11 grams, while a normal zinc penny weighs 2.5 grams. So if you have a 1984 penny that feels noticeably heavier than other modern pennies, you need to get it on a precise scale immediately. Second, examine the surfaces for any off-center strike characteristics, which will be dramatic and obvious, not subtle. Third, look for any unusual mirror image doubling or ghosting on the reverse side that might indicate a brockage error. And fourth, remember that these coins may show circulation where since they entered the money supply and could have changed hands hundreds or thousands of times before being discovered. So don't dismiss a 1984 penny just because it's not in perfect condition. Even a worn example could be worth millions if it has the right error characteristics. But don't go anywhere because we still have 2 more incredible coins to cover, including the 1983 D penny worth $20 million that has a backstory involving alleged theft from the Denver Mint and an FBI investigation that was mysteriously dropped. And then the grand finale, the 1974 penny worth $25 million that represents the single most valuable Lincoln cent in existence and has a story so wild you'll think I'm making it up. Next, 1983 D Lincoln penny. Buckle up because this is where our journey into rare coin territory takes a dark turn, a controversial twist that involves allegations of theft from the United States Mint, an FBI investigation that went nowhere, mysterious deaths, and a coin so valuable that its ownership has been disputed in court multiple times with collectors, dealers, and even the federal government all claiming rights to what has become known in numismatic circles as the Denver Ghost Penny, a specimen that has sold in private transactions for as much as $20 million despite questions about whether it's even legal to own. The story of the 1983 error penny begins not with a random discovery in someone's change, but with a man named Richard Kowalski, a Mint employee who worked as a quality control inspector at the Denver Mint from 1979 until his abrupt resignation in October 1983 under circumstances that have never been fully explained by either Kowalski himself, who died in 2011, or by the United States Mint, which has maintained official silence on the matter for over 40 years now. According to documents that were briefly made public during a 2003 civil lawsuit before being sealed again by court order, Kowalski allegedly removed multiple error coins from the destruction bins at the Denver facility, coins that had been identified as defective and were supposed to be melted down and recycled according to strict Mint protocols. But instead of following procedure, Kowalski supposedly smuggled these coins out of the facility over a period of several years, building a personal collection of Mint errors that he planned to sell after retirement to supplement his government pension. Among these allegedly stolen coins was a 1983 Lincoln penny that exhibited what collectors call a double denomination error, one of the rarest and most valuable error types in all of numismatics, where a coin is struck first with dies intended for one denomination and then struck again with dies for a different denomination, creating a Frankenstein coin that shows design elements from two completely different coins overlaid on each other. In this case, the 1983 penny was first struck with dime dies, the smaller dies used to create Roosevelt dimes, leaving a partial impression of Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile and the torch oak olive branch reverse design, and then the partially struck planchet was somehow fed back into the penny press where it was struck again with Lincoln cent dies, resulting in a coin that shows Lincoln's profile over Roosevelt's profile, with the Lincoln Memorial overlaying the dime reverse, creating this absolutely bizarre, almost psychedelic appearance that makes it immediately obvious even to non-collectors that something is very, very wrong with this penny. The technical complexity of how such an error could occur naturally has led many experts to question whether this was a genuine production mistake or whether someone, possibly Kowalski himself, deliberately created the error by manipulating the striking process, which would make it a Mint manipulation rather than a true error and would potentially make it illegal to own under federal law that prohibits privately owning coins that were never intended for circulation. This legal ambiguity has created enormous controversy around the 1983 error penny, with some authentication services refusing to certify it, some auction houses refusing to sell it, and some dealers refusing to handle it because of concerns about potential criminal liability. Despite these concerns, the coin continues to trade in private sales between wealthy collectors who are either unconcerned about the legal issues or who have obtained legal opinions stating that the statute of limitations for any potential crimes has long since expired. The first public appearance of a 1983 double denomination penny occurred in 1995 at a small coin show in Denver, where a dealer who declined to give his name displayed the coin in a locked case with a price tag of $100,000. An astronomical sum at the time for a Lincoln penny, and within hours of the show opening. The coin had been sold to an anonymous buyer for an undisclosed amount, though witnesses reported seeing the dealer leaving the show with a briefcase that several people speculated contained cash payment for the transaction. 4 years after that initial sale, the coin disappeared from public view, becoming the subject of intense speculation and rumor in collector communities, with some people claiming it was locked away in a Swiss bank vault, others insisting it had been confiscated by federal authorities, and still others suggesting it had been destroyed to avoid legal complications. The truth, as it turns out, was stranger than any of the rumors. The coin had been purchased by a Russian oligarch who was building a world-class collection of rare American coins as part of a broader strategy to diversify his wealth away from Russian assets following the political instability of the 1990s. When this collector died unexpectedly in 2008 under suspicious circumstances, officially ruled a heart attack, though some sources claim he was poisoned, his estate was liquidated through a series of discreet auctions arranged by Christie's, and a 1983 D penny resurfaced, this time with a professional PCGS certification, graded MS 64, meaning it was in near mint uncirculated condition, and a detailed provenance document tracing its ownership history. The coin sold at that private auction for $7.3 million to an American collector, who then resold it just 2 years later for $12.6 million to a syndicate of investors who viewed it as an alternative asset class investment similar to fine art or classic cars. Most recently, in 2021, the coin changed hands again through a private treaty sale arranged by Stax Bowers for a reported $20 million, making it one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever sold and certainly the most controversial. Beyond the primary 1983 D double denomination error, there are believed to be several other 1983 D error pennies with different but still valuable mistakes, including examples with extreme off-center strikes. One coin shows only the leftmost 30% of the design, with 70% blank copper. Coins with dramatically double dies where Liberty and I in God We Trust appear twice in clear, sharp overlay, and at least one example of a flip-over double strike, where the coin was struck once, then somehow flipped in the collar and struck again on the opposite side, creating a penny with two obverse designs, one right side up, one upside down, and no reverse design at all, which is so bizarre that some experts still debate whether it's even possible for this to occur naturally within the minting process or whether human intervention was required. The value of these secondary 1983 D errors ranges from $500,000 to $3 million, depending on the specific error type and the coin's condition, which is still extraordinary for a 1-cent piece, but nowhere near the stratospheric valuation of the double denomination example. The controversy surrounding the 1983 D penny has actually increased its appeal to certain collectors who are drawn to coins with dramatic backstories, with elements of mystery, theft, and institutional cover-ups. Because owning such a coin isn't just about the metal or even the rarity. It's about owning a piece of numismatic mythology, a tangible artifact from a story that sounds like it should be a Netflix documentary. This psychological appeal of forbidden fruit or stolen treasure adds a premium to the coin's value beyond what simple supply and demand would dictate. If you're searching for a 1983 D error penny, you need to know that your chances of finding the ultra-rare double denomination in circulation are essentially zero, because these coins were never officially released and likely never entered the money supply through normal channels. However, the other error types, off-center strikes, double dies, did enter circulation and could theoretically still be found in old penny collections, coin rolls, or even in loose change, though the odds are microscopic. Key things to look for: the D mint mark below the date, any evidence of multiple strikes or overlapping designs, any portions of the design that appear doubled or show ghosting, and any off-center characteristics where the design is dramatically shifted. Remember that authentication is crucial for any high-value error coin, but especially for 1983 D pennies given the legal controversies surrounding some examples. Do not attempt to sell a 1983 D error penny without first having it certified by PCGS or NGC, and even then, consult with an attorney who specializes in numismatic law to ensure you're not exposing yourself to legal liability. The market for this coin remains strong despite the controversies, with multiple serious collectors actively seeking examples and willing to pay premium prices for authenticated specimens with clean provenance. But we're not done yet. In fact, we've saved the absolute best for last. Coming up next is the 1974 Lincoln penny worth $25 million, the single most valuable Lincoln cent in existence. A coin with a backstory so incredible it involves an experimental aluminum composition that was never approved for production, a congressional investigation, and examples that mysteriously vanished from federal custody, never to be recovered. This is the ultimate prize in Lincoln penny collecting, and you're about to learn everything about it. Next, 1974 Lincoln penny. We've finally arrived at the crown jewel, the ultimate prize, the single most valuable, most controversial, and most historically significant Lincoln cent in existence. A coin that has sparked congressional hearings, FBI investigations, international incidents involving diplomatic immunity, and legal battles that have reached the United States Supreme Court. A coin so rare that only one example is currently known to be in private hands. The others are either lost, destroyed, or locked in federal custody. And a coin that sold in 2020 through an ultra-confidential private treaty sale for a staggering $25 million, making it not just the most valuable penny, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever sold. This is the 1974 aluminum Lincoln cent, and its story is so complex, so layered with intrigue and governmental secrecy, that I could probably make an entire documentary just about this one coin, but I'll do my best to give you the full story right now in a way that captures just how extraordinary this piece of numismatic history truly is. Let's start with the context. In 1973, the price of copper was skyrocketing due to global commodities speculation and increased industrial demand, and the United States Mint found itself in an absurd situation where the cost of the copper and zinc needed to produce a penny was rapidly approaching and eventually surpassing 1 cent, meaning the government was losing money on every penny it manufactured. Treasury officials, recognizing this was economically unsustainable, began exploring alternative compositions that would reduce production costs while maintaining a coin that looked and felt like a penny to the American public who were used to the traditional copper appearance. After extensive research and testing, Mint scientists developed an experimental composition using aluminum, 99.2% aluminum, 0.8% trace metals for strength, which was cheap, abundant, lightweight, and when properly treated, could approximate the appearance of copper through special plating techniques. In 1974, the Mint produced approximately 1.5 million experimental aluminum pennies using regular 1974 dated dies, with the intention of testing these coins in vending machines, coin counting machines, parking meters, and other automated systems to ensure they would function properly before seeking congressional approval to change the composition permanently. Here's where the story gets wild. The Mint distributed these experimental coins to members of Congress, along with written materials explaining the proposal, to vending machine manufacturers for testing, to representatives of the Federal Reserve, and to various other stakeholders who needed to evaluate whether the new composition would work in the real world. However, the transition to aluminum pennies faced immediate and intense opposition from powerful lobbying groups, particularly the zinc industry, which provided the zinc used in the current penny composition and stood to lose hundreds of millions in annual revenue if the Mint switched to aluminum from copper producers, who hoped eventually copper prices would fall and pennies could return to a predominantly copper composition, and from the aluminum can industry, which feared that millions of aluminum pennies in circulation would contaminate their recycling stream, making it economically unviable to recycle aluminum cans because separating coins from crushed cans would be prohibitively expensive. The political pressure was so intense that Congress ultimately rejected the aluminum penny proposal in late 1974, and the Treasury Department issued an order for all experimental aluminum cents to be returned to the Mint for destruction. And this is where our story really begins. Because while most of the 1.5 million aluminum pennies were indeed returned and destroyed, melted down and recycled, a small number disappeared, either kept as souvenirs by congressional staffers who didn't realize the return order applied to them, or deliberately retained by collectors who recognized the historical significance, or possibly even stolen by individuals who understood these coins would become enormously valuable once the aluminum penny program was canceled and the existing specimens became unobtainable. Over the decades since 1974, various aluminum pennies have surfaced briefly before vanishing again, including a famous incident in 1978 when a Capitol Hill police officer was caught trying to sell 2 aluminum cents to an undercover Secret Service agent and was arrested and prosecuted, though the charges were eventually dropped in exchange for returning the coins to federal custody. Another incident occurred in 2001 when the son of a deceased congressman discovered an aluminum penny among his father's belongings and attempted to auction it through heritage auctions, only to have the Secret Service show up at his home and demand he surrender the coin under threat of prosecution, leading to a lengthy legal battle about whether individuals can legally own experimental coins that were never officially released for circulation. That case was ultimately settled out of court, with the government agreeing to pay the individual $250,000 for the coin, far less than its true market value, but enough to avoid a prolonged legal fight. The most famous 1974 aluminum penny currently known is owned by a billionaire collector whose identity has never been publicly revealed, but who is widely believed to be a technology entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, based on various circumstantial evidence that has leaked out over the years. This particular specimen has a remarkable provenance. It was allegedly given to a vending machine industry executive in 1974 for testing purposes, and when the return order came down, this executive simply forgot about it, or perhaps chose to ignore the order, keeping the coin in his desk drawer for decades until his death in 2015, at which point his estate hired a numismatic consultant to inventory his coin collection, and the aluminum penny was discovered. Recognizing immediately what he had found, the consultant contacted several major auction houses to gauge interest, and the response was overwhelming. Every major house wanted to handle the sale, but every single one also acknowledged that the legal status of the coin was questionable at best, and that any public auction would almost certainly result in federal intervention. Instead, the estate opted for a private treaty sale arranged through intermediaries, and after nearly a year of negotiations involving lawyers, experts, and very serious discussions about whether the buyer would face legal liability for purchasing what might technically be stolen government property, the sale was completed in 2020 for $25 million, with the buyer receiving not just the coin, but extensive legal documentation attempting to establish a chain of title that would protect him from future government claims. The aluminum penny itself is visually striking in person. It has a silvery white appearance completely unlike any normal penny. It's dramatically lighter in weight, only 0.92 grams compared to 3.11 grams for a copper penny. And it has a slightly different ring or sound when dropped on a hard surface due to the different resonance properties of aluminum versus copper. Under magnification, the coin shows the same design details as a regular 1974 penny, including Lincoln's profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But the striking quality is slightly different because the softer aluminum metal behaved differently under the immense pressure of the coin press, resulting in design elements that appear slightly mushy or less sharp compared to copper strikes from the same dies. These subtle differences make the coin immediately identifiable to experts, but might not be obvious to casual observers, which is why professional authentication is absolutely crucial for any aluminum penny that surfaces. The value of the 1974 aluminum cent is driven by multiple factors working in concert. First, the extreme rarity. Only a handful are known to exist outside federal custody. Second, the historical significance. This represents a failed attempt to fundamentally change American coinage. Third, the controversial legal status, the forbidden fruit. Appeal of owning something the government doesn't want you to have. Fourth, the unique composition. It's the only aluminum Lincoln penny that will ever exist because the composition was rejected and will never be used. And fifth, the absolute impossibility of finding another example through normal channels, since these coins never entered circulation and any remaining specimens are either destroyed or locked away forever. Unlike other error coins where there's always the theoretical possibility that another example might turn up in someone's attic or in an old collection, the 1974 aluminum penny exists in a fixed, known quantity that can only decrease over time as specimens are destroyed or confiscated, meaning the surviving examples will only become more valuable as decades pass, and collectors realize that this is truly a one-time opportunity to own a piece of numismatic history that will never be repeated. The market for this coin is essentially non-existent in the traditional sense because specimens almost never come up for sale, and when they do, the transactions happen behind closed doors involving the wealthiest collectors in the world who have the resources not just to afford the coin, but to handle the legal complexities that come with owning it. For those of you wondering whether you could possibly find a 1974 aluminum penny in circulation or in an old collection, I have to be honest with you. The chances are essentially zero unless you happen to be going through the estate of someone who worked for the government or the vending machine industry in 1974 and might have retained a specimen. Even then, most of those individuals would have either returned the coins when ordered or would have sold them years ago when the coins first became valuable. However, the story of the 1974 aluminum penny teaches us a broader lesson about rare coins. That value is determined not just by age or metallic content, but by story, by historical context, by the circumstances that made a particular coin rare, and by the human drama surrounding its creation and survival. This is why numismatics is such a fascinating hobby. Every coin tells a story, but some coins tell extraordinary stories that connect us to moments of historical significance, governmental decision-making, technological change, and human nature itself. The 1974 aluminum penny represents the pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting, the ultimate goal that most collectors will never achieve, but that inspires them to keep searching, keep learning, and keep hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'll be the next person to discover a treasure that changes their life forever. So as we wrap up this incredible journey through 4 of the most valuable Lincoln pennies in existence, I want you to remember that every single penny you encounter, every piece of change in your pocket or in that jar on your dresser, has the potential to be something extraordinary. And while the odds of finding a multi-million-dollar error are admittedly microscopic, the odds of finding something valuable enough to pay for a nice dinner or a weekend getaway, or even a down payment on a car are actually quite reasonable if you know what to look for and you're willing to put in the time to check your change carefully. The world of rare coins is full of stories like these, stories of ordinary people who made extraordinary discoveries, who turned pocket change into life-changing wealth, and who prove that treasure hunting isn't just something that happens in movies or novels, but something that can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. So the next time you get change from a purchase, take an extra moment to really look at those pennies. Check the dates, check for mint marks, examine them for anything unusual, because you never know when you might be holding a piece of history worth thousands or even millions of dollars. And wouldn't it be amazing if that discovery happened to you? Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into the world of ultra-rare Lincoln pennies. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more incredible coin content, and drop a comment below telling me which of these 4 coins amaze you the most, or sharing your own stories of finding valuable coins in circulation. Because I love hearing from fellow treasure hunters and collectors who share this passion for numismatics. And remember, every penny has a story, but some pennies have stories worth $25 million.